Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into a topic that's absolutely crucial in the construction world.
Yeah.
Crane safety regulations.
You got it.
Now, if you're a safety professional, a crane operator, or even thinking about getting your crane operator license, this one's for you.
Absolutely.
We're going straight to the source for this deep dive.
Straight to the source.
Official OSHA documents on training requirements, and we've got some extra clarification on signal person qualifications.
That's right. We are going deep into the world of OSHA.
Okay.
The Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
Right.
Their regulations are the bedrock of safety on job sites.
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with powerful machinery like cranes.
Okay. So let's get into it.
Right.
You know how sometimes on site you see those certification cards for signal persons?
Right.
What we're going to uncover is what makes them legit in OSHA's eyes.
Oh, yeah.
And break down the different types of training needed to keep everyone safe around cranes.
And I think what's really important to remember here is that OSHA regulations, especially those outlined in Standard 1926.1430, are really about protecting lives.
Yeah.
We're talking about preventing serious accidents and making sure everyone goes home safe at the end of the day.
That's a great point. So let's start with the basics. OSHA mandates various types of training for anyone working with or around cranes. It's not just about knowing how to operate the machinery. It's about understanding the potential hazards and how to mitigate them.
Exactly.
Okay.
And one of the biggest hazards they emphasize is working near overhead power lines.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you've got these massive metal machines operating near high voltage electricity.
Right.
The risk of electrocution is a very real danger.
Yeah.
OSHA requires comprehensive training for anyone involved.
Oh.
From the operator to the riggers and signal persons.
You know, it's funny because when you think about construction sites, those massive power lines are almost like part of the scenery.
Yeah, they're just there.
But they're incredibly dangerous if you're not aware and trained on how to work around them safely.
Absolutely. OSHA wants everyone to understand the risks.
Right.
Maintain safe distances and know exactly what to do in an emergency.
Yeah.
And it's not just about power lines. Think about all the moving parts on a crane.
Oh, yeah.
OSHA calls out the dangers of pinch points, where someone could get crushed between those parts or between the crane and a fixed object.
Pinch points. You know, I've heard that term before, but honestly, I never really thought about how serious those hazards can be.
Yeah.
It seems like something that could easily be overlooked in the hustle and bustle of a job site.
It's one of those things that seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how often it leads to accidents. That's why training on pinch point awareness is so vital for everyone on site, from the operator to the ground crew.
So we've got power line safety and pinch point awareness. What other types of training does OSHA require?
Well, another critical area is tag-out procedures. Imagine a maintenance crew working on a crane. And someone forgets to properly lock out the power source. Then another worker unknowingly starts the crane while the crew is still inside.
Oh, my goodness.
It's a terrifying scenario.
That sends chills down my spine just thinking about it.
That's why tag-out is so crucial.
Yeah.
It's a system that involves physically locking out the energy source and tagging it to clearly show who's working on the equipment and why it's shut down.
Right.
This prevents accidental startups and protects the lives of those working on the crane. OSHA mandates training on this for anyone who might be involved in operating or energizing the crane.
Okay.
From operators and maintenance personnel to supervisors.
It's like putting a big do not disturb sign on the crane.
Yeah.
But with some serious life-saving implications.
Exactly. And while we're talking about specific roles, let's not forget those often unsung heroes of crane operations, the signal persons.
Right. The folks who are essentially guiding the crane operator through every lift and movement. I imagine clear communication between the signal person and the operator is absolutely crucial.
You hit the nail on the head. A well-trained signal person is vital for safe crane operation. They're the crucial link between the operator, who often has limited visibility, and the load being moved.
And OSHA doesn't take signal person qualifications lightly.
Nope.
What are some of the key things these individuals need to know?
They need to be fluent in hand signals, voice signals, and even radio communication, depending on the job site.
Wow.
They also need a deep understanding of the equipment's limitations, load dynamics like swing and stocking distances, and potential hazards like boom deflection.
Boom deflection.
Yeah.
That's a term I haven't heard before.
Yeah.
Can you break that down a bit more?
Sure.
What causes it, and why is it such a safety concern?
Think of it like this. Every crane has a maximum weight limit it can safely lift.
Okay.
If you exceed that limit, the crane's arm, the boom, can start to bend or deflect. This can make the crane unstable and potentially lead to a collapse, which is why signal persons need to be aware of these limits and communicate them effectively.
So it's not just about knowing the signals, it's about understanding the physics of how these machines operate.
Right.
And the potential risks involved.
That makes sense.
Makes sense. And speaking of qualifications, you mentioned earlier that OSHA also has specific requirements for individuals overseeing safety and technical aspects of crane operations. They call these folks competent or qualified persons.
Exactly. These are the folks who ensure everyone on site is up to snuff.
Right.
It could be safety managers, lift directors, or engineers who are responsible for planning and overseeing the safe execution of crane lifts.
Okay.
OSHA requires them to have a certain level of knowledge and experience to make sure operations are carried out safely and in accordance with regulations.
So it's like having a dedicated safety expert on site who's specifically focused on crane operations.
That's one way to look at it. And speaking of experts, we're going to bring in some more expertise in the next part of our deep dive. We're going to explore the second OSHA document, the one focusing on signal person qualifications and those certification cards we mentioned earlier.
Sounds good. All right, so we're back and ready to dig a little deeper into those signal person qualifications.
Right.
We talked about those certification cards earlier.
Right.
What exactly makes them valid proof of a signal person's qualifications according to OSHA?
You see them flashed around on job sites, and you might think they're just a formality.
Right.
But OSHA has very specific rules about what needs to be on that card.
So it's more than just a name and a photo.
It's not just a piece of plastic. Okay. It's proof that the signal person has met rigorous standards.
What kind of information are we talking about here?
Well, it needs to list out the specific types of signaling the person is qualified for.
Okay.
Whether it's hand signals, voice signals, or even radio communication.
Gotcha.
It also needs to confirm that they understand the specific signals used on that particular job site, and that they've passed both written and practical tests.
So it's like a driver's license, but for signaling.
Exactly.
Specific to each job site.
For that job.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, here's something else that I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
OSHA allows for third-party evaluator.
That's right.
To assess and qualify signal persons. So it's not always the employer doing the evaluating.
That's right.
So you could have, say, a specialized training organization.
Yeah.
Or a joint apprenticeship program evaluating signal persons.
Precisely. And OSHA even specifically mentions joint apprenticeship programs as a good example.
Okay.
This ensures a certain level of expertise and objectivity in the evaluation process.
Now, what about the availability of this qualification documentation?
All right.
Our source document mentions that it needs to be readily available on site.
Right.
What does that actually mean in practice?
That's a great question. And OSHA provides some helpful examples to illustrate what they mean by readily available. Imagine an OSHA inspector shows up, or the crane operator needs to verify the signal person's qualifications, or even another worker has concerns. That documentation needs to be produced immediately.
So it's not enough for the employer to say, oh yeah, we have it filed away somewhere. No. They need to have it on hand at the job site.
Absolutely. Think of it like a fire extinguisher.
Right.
You need to know where it is and be able to access it quickly in an emergency.
Gotcha.
It could be physically on the signal person in a designated location nearby, or even readily accessible electronically.
Okay.
The key is that there's no delay in proving the signal person is qualified.
So it's about transparency and accountability.
Exactly.
And speaking of accountability, let's talk about the employer's responsibility in all of this.
Right. You know, no matter who provides the training or the evaluation, ultimately the employer is legally responsible for ensuring everyone on that job site is trained and qualified according to OSHA standards. There's no passing the buck when it comes to safety.
So whether the training is done in-house or by an external provider, the employer needs to make sure it meets OSHA requirements and that their employees are competent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, we're talking about real-world safety here.
Yeah.
The kind that protects lives and livelihoods.
Right.
This isn't just about checking boxes and avoiding fines.
Right.
It's about fostering a culture of safety where everyone understands the risks and takes responsibility for their actions.
I like that culture of safety.
Yes.
Because rules and regulations can only go so far right.
Right.
So that shared commitment to doing things the right way really makes a difference.
Absolutely. It's about going beyond a checklist mentality and fostering a true understanding of why these safety measures are in place.
Now let's circle back to those OSHA training mandates for a moment.
Okay.
We've talked about signal persons operators and those competent/qualified individuals.
Right.
But OSHA also gets pretty specific about the content of the training, right?
Absolutely. And one area they really hammer home is the danger of overhead power lines.
Makes sense. You don't want to mess around with electricity, especially when you're dealing with massive metal objects like cranes.
Not at all. OSHA wants to make sure everyone understands the risk of electrocution, knows how to maintain safe distances, and is trained on emergency procedures in case of contact.
Wow.
They want to make sure everyone goes home safe at the end of the day.
Right.
And it's not just power lines. Remember those pinch points we talked about?
Right, those areas where someone could get crushed between moving parts or between the crane and another object.
Right.
They seem like an easy hazard to overlook on a busy job site.
Exactly. That's why OSHA stresses the need for ongoing awareness of pinch points.
Okay.
It's not enough to just point them out during initial training. It needs to be a continuous conversation.
So things like safety briefings, toolbox talks, visual reminders, they all play a part in keeping those hazards top of mind.
Absolutely, because even a momentary lapse in focus can have tragic consequences.
Right.
And speaking of serious consequences, let's revisit those tag-out procedures.
Right, those procedures for locking out the crane's power source during maintenance and repair.
It's a formalized system designed to prevent accidental startups while someone is working on the crane.
Right.
You physically lock out the energy source and attach a tag that clearly identifies who's working on the equipment and why it's shut down.
Right.
No one can remove that tag or restore power without going through a specific clearance process.
It's a simple concept, but so powerful in its ability to prevent accidents.
Exactly. And OSHA requires thorough training on tag-out for anyone who might be involved in starting, energizing, or operating the crane.
Okay.
That includes operators, maintenance personnel, and even supervisors.
Wow.
They want to ensure that everyone understands the importance of this procedure and follows it diligently.
You know, it's interesting how OSHA regulations go beyond simply outlining the rules. They really emphasize the reasoning behind those rules, the why behind the what.
That's a great observation. And I think that's one of the things that makes OSHA so effective.
Yeah.
They're not just dictating rules, they're educating people about the hazards and empowering them to make safe choices.
It's about creating that culture of safety we talked about earlier.
Right.
A culture where everyone understands that safety is not just a box to check, but a shared responsibility.
Exactly. And it's a responsibility that goes beyond just following the rules. It's about being proactive, thinking critically, and constantly looking for ways to improve safety on the job site.
So it sounds like OSHA regulations really provide a solid framework for crane safety. But you said it's not just about blindly following the rules, right?
Exactly. Construction sites are dynamic.
Right.
Every job's a little different. Every lift has its own unique challenges. You can't just rely on a checklist or a manual for every situation.
It's more about understanding the principles behind those regulations and applying them to real-world scenarios.
That's the key. You need to develop that critical thinking.
Yeah.
The ability to assess the situation on the ground and make smart, safe choices.
So it's almost like becoming a safety detective of sorts.
That's a great way to put it.
Looking for clues, potential hazards, anything that might compromise safety.
And those OSHA regulations are your guidebook, your reference manual.
Okay.
They lay the foundation for safe practices, but it's up to you to apply them thoughtfully in the field.
Which is why ongoing training is so important.
Yes.
It's not just a one-time thing.
Construction is always evolving. New equipment, new techniques, new challenges. So whether you're the crane operator, the signal person, the safety manager, you've got to be committed to continuous learning.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's zoom out for a minute. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah, we have.
For all those safety professionals, crane operators, aspiring operators out there, what's the big takeaway?
I think the key message is this. OSHA sets a high bar for crane safety for a reason. These regulations are literally a roadmap to preventing serious injuries and even deaths.
It's not just paperwork or bureaucracy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, understanding and following these regulations is absolutely paramount.
And it's not just about following the letter of the law, but also understanding the why behind it.
Right. Why is training so crucial?
Yeah.
Why do we have signal persons?
Right.
Why are tag-out procedures so important? Once you grasp the reasons,
yeah,
you're more likely to embrace those safety measures, not just grudgingly comply.
Okay, listeners, we're wrapping up our deep dive here, but before we go,
Right.
I want to leave you with one final thought.
Right.
Imagine you're back on that job site.
Okay.
You see a crane in operation.
Mm-hmm.
What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Yeah.
Is it the schedule, the budget?
Right.
Or is it the safety of everyone involved?
Because at the end of the day, that's what truly matters.
Yeah.
All the regulations and procedures are meaningless if we're not putting safety first.
That's a powerful point. So as you go about your work,
right,
whatever your role on site, remember this. Safety is not just a box to check.
Nope.
It's a mindset, a commitment, a responsibility that everyone shares.
And if you're ever in doubt, if you have a question, a concern, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah.
Consult the OSHA resources, talk to your supervisor, connect with other experts. Knowledge is power, and when it comes to crane safety,
right,
that power can save lives.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative, engaging, and maybe even a little thought-provoking. And remember, this deep dive was brought to you by Safety One. One source, your trusted partner for all things safety.
Absolutely.
Check out their website for a wealth of resources and information. Stay safe out there.